Now listen, you got to understand something about men. When a man distances himself from you, when he starts pulling back, when those good morning texts slow down, when the calls get shorter, when the energy shifts, most women make the same mistake. They panic, they start chasing, they double text, they over explain, they try to fix something that ain't even clear yet. And I'm telling you right now, that's the worst move you can make. Don't chase him. The moment a man distances himself from you, the absolute worst thing you can do is start running after him emotionally. See, when a man pulls back, most women feel panic rising in their chest. The texts slow down, the calls become shorter, the attention shifts, and immediately the mind starts racing. Did I do something wrong? Is there someone else? Why is he acting different? And before you know it, you're sending long messages, double texting, trying to fix a problem that hasn't even been clearly defined. That energy right there, that chasing energy, pushes him even further away. Men are wired differently. When something feels overwhelming, confusing, or heavy, we step back to think. We go quiet. Not because we don't care, but because we process internally. If you start flooding him with emotion while he's trying to create space, he doesn't feel loved. He feels pressured, and pressure makes a man retreat deeper. So instead of chasing, you shift your position. You lean back. You stop initiating every conversation. You let him wonder what you're doing. You give him the same space he's giving you. Not in anger, not in revenge, in control. When you stop chasing, something powerful happens. The dynamic changes. If he was used to you always reaching out first, always asking how he feels, always keeping the connection alive, your silence becomes noticeable. And silence creates awareness. He starts to feel the absence of your energy. He starts to recognize what you are bringing to the table. Chasing communicates fear. Leaning back communicates confidence. A confident woman doesn't beg for attention. She doesn't compete for priority. She understands her value doesn't decrease just because someone else is confused. When you chase, you place him in the position of power. When you lean back, you regain your balance. This doesn't mean you become cold or rude. It means you stop overextending yourself. You stop making excuses for his behavior. You stop trying to convince him to see your worth. Because here's the truth. If a man needs to be convinced to value you, he's already misaligned. When you chase, you're saying, Kai, please don't leave. When you lean back, you're saying, I'll be fine either way. And that difference is everything. Men are naturally drawn to what feels secure and steady. If you react emotionally every time there's distance, he subconsciously feels responsible for your emotional stability. That becomes heavy. But when you remain composed, when you stay grounded, when you continue living your life without making him the center of it, he sees strength. Strength attracts. Desperation repels. You don't need to announce your shift. You don't need to say, fine, I won't text you anymore. You simply adjust. You get busy with your goals. You spend time with people who uplift you. You pour that extra energy back into yourself instead of pouring it into someone who is pulling away. And here's the key. You don't do this to manipulate him into coming back. You do it because your dignity matters more than temporary reassurance. If he comes forward again, it should be because he realized your value, not because you begged him to notice it. If he truly cares, space will make him step up. If he doesn't, space will reveal that too. Either way, you win because you didn't abandon yourself trying to hold on to someone else. So when he distances himself, you don't chase. You center yourself. You maintain your rhythm. You let him feel what life is like without constant access to you. And if he chooses to close that distance again, he'll do it intentionally. But if he doesn't, you walk forward knowing you handled it with control, not chaos. Let silence work for you. When a man distances himself and starts ignoring you, your instinct might scream, say something, fix this, clear it up right now. But the most powerful move in that moment is restraint. Silence is uncomfortable, especially when feelings are involved. It feels like losing control. It feels like the connection is slipping through your fingers. But what most people don't understand is that silence is not weakness. It is leverage. When you keep talking, explaining, questioning, and reacting, you give him constant emotional access to you. He doesn't have to wonder how you feel. He doesn't have to miss you. He doesn't have to think. You're doing all the emotional labor for both of you. But when you go quiet, not out of anger, not out of immaturity, but out of composure, something shifts. Silence creates space, and space creates clarity. When you stop asking why he's distant, he has to sit with his own behavior. When you stop reminding him of your presence, he has to notice your absence. That quiet gap becomes loud in his mind. He starts to think, why hasn't she reached out? Is she pulling away? Is she done? And now the emotional weight shifts back onto him. You see, people value what they feel they could lose. If you're always available, always responding immediately, always trying to smooth things over, there's no urgency. But silence introduces uncertainty, and uncertainty triggers reflection. Now, this isn't about playing childish games. It's about emotional discipline. There's a difference. You're not ignoring him to punish him. You're giving the situation room to breathe. You're allowing his actions to speak without interrupting them. When a man pulls back, he is either overwhelmed, distracted, unsure, or losing interest. Silence helps you identify which one it is. If he cares, he will break the silence. He will reach out. He will notice the change and feel compelled to reconnect. But if he remains distant, even when you're quiet, that silence has given you valuable information. Silence exposes intention. If you keep chasing conversation, you blur the truth. You make it easier for him to stay half invested. But when you step back, he has to decide. Move closer or drift further away. And that decision tells you everything you need to know. There's also another layer to this. Silence protects your emotional dignity. When you react immediately, especially from a place of hurt, you might say things you regret. You might over-explain your feelings. You might reveal insecurity that you didn't even mean to show. Silence gives you time to stabilize. It allows you to process your emotions privately instead of publicly. A woman who can sit in silence without panicking radiates strength. She shows that her world doesn't collapse just because someone went quiet. That kind of emotional steadiness is rare, and it commands respect. While you're silent, you're not frozen. You're living. You're focusing. You're continuing your routine. You're not checking your phone every 5 minutes. You're not analyzing his last message. You're not rereading conversations, trying to decode hidden meaning. You are calm, and calm energy unsettles someone who expected chaos. If he thought distancing himself would trigger a dramatic reaction, and instead he gets composure, he starts to reassess. Because now he realizes you're not emotionally dependent, you're not clinging, you're secure, and security is powerful. Silence also forces him to take initiative. If he wants connection, he has to create it. If he wants conversation, he has to start it. If he wants access to you, he has to earn it again. You are no longer doing the heavy lifting, but understand this clearly. Silence is not forever. It is a response, not a lifestyle. If he re-engages with clarity and consistency, then communication can resume normally. But if he continues to ignore you, your silence becomes your exit. Because if someone can comfortably live without hearing from you, you have to question how much you truly mattered in their present. So when he distances himself, don't rush to fill the gap with noise. Let the silence breathe. Let him feel it. Let it reveal the truth without you forcing it. And in that quiet space, you'll find your power again. Focus on your value, not his mood. The moment a man starts acting distant, many women shift their entire emotional center onto him. His tone changes, so your mood changes. His replies get shorter, so your confidence shrinks. His energy drops, and suddenly you're questioning your worth. That's the trap. The biggest mistake you can make when a man pulls away is making his behavior a measurement of your value. A man's mood is temporary. Your value is permanent. When he distances himself, it could be stress, work pressure, personal confusion, emotional immaturity, or even simple distraction. But instead of assuming it's about you, you immediately internalize it. You start thinking, maybe I said too much. Maybe I wasn't enough. Maybe I should change how I act. And that right there is where you lose your balance. Your worth does not fluctuate based on someone else's emotional state. If he wakes up quiet, that doesn't mean you became less attractive overnight. If he responds dry, that doesn't mean you suddenly lost your spark. When you tie your self-esteem to someone else's attention, you hand them control over your emotions without them even asking for it. Instead, shift the focus back to yourself. Ask yourself, are you proud of how you show up? Are you living with standards? Are you maintaining your boundaries? If the answer is yes, then his mood is his responsibility, not yours. Strong energy comes from self-assurance. When you know who you are, a temporary shift in attention doesn't shake you. You don't scramble to fix yourself because someone else is acting off. You remain steady. Here's the truth. Men can sense when a woman's confidence is dependent on their validation. The more you look to him for reassurance, the more pressure he feels. But when you are secure within yourself, when you don't crumble because he had a distant day, you create a different dynamic. You show emotional independence. Emotional independence is attractive because it removes desperation from the equation. Instead of watching his every move, Watch your growth. Instead of analyzing his last message, analyze your own progress. Are you working on your goals? Are you taking care of your health? Are you expanding your life outside of the relationship? Because when your world revolves entirely around him, any small shift feels catastrophic. But when your world is full, when you have purpose, friends, ambitions, hobbies, and self-respect, his temporary distance becomes a small ripple, not a storm. Focusing on your value also means maintaining standards. If he distances himself repeatedly without explanation, you don't lower your expectations just to keep him comfortable. You don't overcompensate by being extra sweet, extra available, extra accommodating. You stay consistent. You remain the same grounded person you were when things felt good. Consistency shows strength. When you chase reassurance, you communicate insecurity. When you maintain your posture, you communicate confidence. And confidence shifts how he sees you. There's also another layer here. When you focus on your value, you stop over-romanticizing his behavior. You see it clearly. If he's distant, you observe. If he's inconsistent, you take note. You don't make excuses for him just to preserve your fantasy of the relationship. A woman who knows her value doesn't beg for clarity. She expects it. She doesn't tolerate confusion long-term. She doesn't stay in situations where she constantly feels unsure. So instead of asking, why is he acting like this? Start asking, does this align with what I deserve? That question alone changes your posture. When you operate from value, you become calm. When you operate from fear, you become reactive. Fear says, don't lose him. Value says, if he's not aligned, he can go. And that shift is powerful, because the woman who understands her worth doesn't shrink when someone pulls away. She expands, she strengthens, she elevates. And if he returns to a woman who never doubted herself in the first place. Control your emotions, not his actions. When a man distances himself, your first reaction is usually emotional. Your chest tightens, your thoughts race, your imagination starts building stories that may not even be true. You want answers immediately. You want reassurance instantly. But here's the reality. You cannot control what he does. You cannot control when he texts, how he feels, or whether he decides to lean in or pull away. The only thing fully in your power is how you respond. Emotional control is strength. Reactivity is weakness. If he takes longer to reply and you immediately send 3 more messages, that's reaction. If he cancels plans and you explode with frustration, that's reaction. If he seems distant and you accuse him without clarity, that's reaction. And reaction is driven by fear. But when you pause, when you breathe, when you choose not to let your emotions spill out uncontrollably, that's power. Because now you are responding, not reacting. A man pulling away can trigger insecurity. That's natural. But insecurity only takes over when you let emotion drive behavior. You might feel anxious, but you don't have to act anxious. You might feel hurt, but you don't have to behave hurt. Emotional maturity is feeling something deeply and still choosing composure. When you try to control his actions, you lose control of yourself. You start monitoring him, checking his activity, watching his online status, counting how many minutes it takes for him to reply. That obsession drains you. And the more you try to control what he's doing, the more powerless you actually feel. Instead, redirect that energy. If he hasn't replied, you continue your day. If he's distant, you stay steady. If he seems distracted, you don't compete for attention. You remain grounded. Calm energy unsettles inconsistent behavior. When he expects drama and you give stability, the dynamic shifts. If he distances himself hoping you'll chase and you remain composed, he now has to confront his own move. He either steps forward or he continues stepping back. But you don't break your peace in the process. Controlling your emotions also protects your dignity. Words spoken from hurt can't be unsaid. Accusations made without proof can't be erased. Emotional outbursts may feel relieving in the moment, but they often create regret later. Strength is restraint. You don't suppress how you feel. You manage it privately. You talk to a trusted friend. You journal. You process internally. But you don't dump raw emotion onto him without clarity. When you control your emotions, you become unpredictable in the best way. Instead of being reactive and easy to read, you are centered. That makes you harder to manipulate, harder to shake, harder to destabilize. And here's something important. When you stay emotionally balanced, you can see the situation clearly. If you're overwhelmed by feelings, you can't assess whether he's temporarily stressed or permanently disengaged. But calmness gives perspective. You start observing patterns instead of reacting to moments. If this distance is rare and he communicates eventually, you'll see that. If this distance is constant and dismissive, you'll see that too. But you can't evaluate properly if you're in emotional chaos. Controlling your emotions doesn't mean you tolerate disrespect. It means you don't respond impulsively. If his behavior continues to show lack of effort, you address it calmly. You state your boundary without anger. You communicate once, clearly, and then you watch what he does. Because at the end of the day, actions reveal more than reactions. You cannot force a man to choose you. You cannot demand genuine interest. But you can maintain your self-respect regardless of his behavior. And that's the ultimate control. When he distances himself, you don't lose yourself trying to regain him. You stay centered. You stay calm. You stay in command of your emotions, even if you can't command his decisions. Observe his pattern, not his words. When a man distances himself, he may still say all the right things. He might tell you he's just busy. He might say he cares. He might promise he'll call later. And if you're emotionally attached, you'll want to believe every word because it gives you comfort. But comfort is not clarity. Words can soothe you temporarily, but patterns reveal the truth permanently. Anyone can say, I miss you. Anyone can say, I've just been stressed. Anyone can say, you're important to me. But if his actions consistently show distance, inconsistency, and lack of effort, then the pattern is louder than the promise. A man's behavior over time tells you who he really is. When you focus on isolated moments, you get confused. One sweet message can erase 5 days of silence in your mind. One late-night phone call can make you forget a week of emotional absence. But when you step back and look at the bigger picture, you start seeing repetition. Does he only reach out when it's convenient? Does he disappear when things get serious? Does he give affection only when he feels like it, not when it's needed? Patterns don't lie. If a man distances himself once because he's overwhelmed and then communicates clearly, that's a situation. But if he repeatedly pulls away every time things deepen, that's a pattern, and patterns show intention. Many women get trapped in potential. They focus on who he could be instead of who he consistently shows himself to be. They listen to apologies instead of watching improvement. They hold on to the words, I'm trying, without asking, is anything actually changing? Observation requires emotional discipline. It means you don't jump to conclusions, but you also don't ignore reality. You collect data. You notice consistency. You measure effort. You pay attention to how you feel around him. If you constantly feel uncertain, anxious, and unsure where you stand, that feeling is part of the pattern too. A healthy connection feels stable. It doesn't feel like guessing. If you are always trying to decode his behavior, always wondering what you did wrong, always waiting for the next shift, that instability is information. When you observe instead of react, you regain power. You stop arguing over small incidents. You stop asking for explanations every time he goes quiet. Instead, you mentally take note. This is the 3rd time he's done this. This is how he handles conflict. This is how he behaves when he's stressed. Over time, a clear picture forms. And once the picture is clear, you don't need to beg for clarity anymore. Men reveal their priorities through consistency. If he wants to talk to you, he will make time. If he values connection, he will maintain it. If he cares deeply, his effort won't disappear randomly without explanation. Words are easy. Effort requires intention. If he says he misses you but doesn't initiate plans, observe that. If he says he's serious about you but keeps creating distance, observe that. If he promises change but repeats the same behavior, observe that. You don't need to confront every pattern immediately. Sometimes silence and awareness are stronger than confrontation. When you truly see someone clearly, you stop trying to force them into being something they're not. Observation protects you from emotional manipulation. It keeps you grounded in facts instead of fantasies. And here's the important part. Once a pattern becomes clear, you decide based on reality, not hope. You don't stay because of what he says. You stay because of what he consistently does. Because at the end of the day, a man's repeated behavior is the most honest thing about him. And when you learn to watch patterns instead of listening to promises, you stop getting confused by mixed signals and start seeing the truth exactly as it is. Be ready to walk away with dignity. This is the part most people struggle with. When feelings are involved, when memories are attached, when hope is still alive, walking away feels like losing. It feels like giving up. But sometimes, the strongest move you can make when a man distances himself and continues to ignore you is being mentally prepared to let him go without chaos. Understand this clearly. Being ready to walk away does not mean you want to leave. It means you respect yourself enough to know you will not stay where you are not valued. There's a difference. When a man pulls away repeatedly and shows no consistent effort to close that distance, you reach a moment of truth. You can either keep adjusting yourself to fit his inconsistency, or you can stand firm in your standards. Most people stay because they fear starting over. They fear being alone. They fear that if they let go, he might finally change for someone else. But staying in a situation where you feel ignored, confused, or emotionally neglected slowly damages your confidence. You begin to accept less than what you once required. You start making excuses for behavior you would have never tolerated before, and little by little you shrink. Walking away with dignity means you don't beg for clarity. You don't threaten to leave hoping he'll panic. You don't create drama to force a reaction. You simply decide that your peace matters more than inconsistent attention. Dignity is quiet strength. When you walk away calmly, without insults, without public scenes, without emotional explosions, it sends a powerful message. It says, I wanted this, but I will not force it. It says, I value connection, but I value myself more. Men are deeply impacted by a woman who can detach gracefully, not because she's cold, but because she's secure. When you don't cling, when you don't chase, when you don't collapse emotionally, he sees that you are choosing him, not depending on him. And there's something about that realization that lingers. But you don't walk away to make him feel regret. You walk away because staying in uncertainty is draining your spirit. You walk away because your standards are not negotiable. You walk away because love should not feel like confusion. Being ready to leave also shifts your mindset. When you're mentally prepared to let go, you stop tolerating small signs of disrespect. You stop ignoring red flags. You stop convincing yourself that maybe it will change without real evidence. You become calm because you know you're not trapped. That calmness changes how you show up. Instead of pleading for attention, you maintain composure. Instead of overanalyzing every text, you observe and decide. Instead of fearing loss, you accept that the wrong person leaving makes space for the right one. And here's the reality. If he truly values you, the possibility of losing you will wake him up. Not your tears, not your anger, not your speeches, your absence. But if he lets you walk away without effort, without resistance, without trying to fix it, then that tells you everything. It means you were holding on tighter than he was. And knowing that frees you. Walking away with dignity protects your self-respect. It ensures that no matter how the story ends, you didn't abandon yourself to keep someone else. You didn't lower your standards to stay comfortable. You didn't beg for love that should have been given freely. Sometimes the most powerful statement you can make is silence followed by movement. No announcement, no threats. Just alignment. When a man distances himself and continues to ignore you, you don't crumble. You don't chase endlessly. You evaluate, you decide, and if necessary, you step away with your head high. Because the woman who can walk away peacefully is the woman who truly understands her worth.